I didn't think I'd end up here. A wax museum. Working the graveyard shift. But after 3 months of rejected job applications and a pile of unopened bills on my kitchen table, I wasn't in a position to be picky. I just needed something, anything with a paycheck and no social interaction. This job was both. Night security attendant needed immediate hire, the listing said. It was posted on a forum I didn't even remember signing up for. The description was vague. No experience necessary. Overnight only. Minimal tasks. Must be comfortable alone. That last part should have been my first red flag. The museum was called Leclerc's Wax Emporium. I'd never heard of it. And I've lived in this city my whole life. Tucked away between a shuttered toy store and a pawn shop, the building didn't look like much. Dusty maroon awnings, paint peeling from the wood panels, and a small golden placard above the door that read simply, "Opened only to memory." Whatever that meant. I showed up for the interview the same evening I applied. They responded quickly and asked me to come in at exactly 9:45 p.m. I remember the time specifically because I thought it was strange. Not 9 o'clock, not 10 o'clock, 9:45. The man who interviewed me was already waiting in the lobby. He wore a dark green suit and smelled faintly of wax and old paper. Didn't introduce himself, didn't shake my hand, just handed me a clipboard with a contract and said, "Sign if you want to work tonight." I probably should have read it, but I didn't. Desperation dulls common sense. The pay was above average. Well above, actually. And there were no background checks, no questions about my past work history. I signed, handed the clipboard back, and within 5 minutes, I was being led through the museum on a quick orientation. The place was strange, not in a cheap or rundown way. No, in fact, it was remarkably well maintained for a place that didn't even show up on Google Maps. The red carpets were clean, the exhibits dustless, the lighting dim but precise. Every wax figure was positioned just so, their glassy eyes frozen mid-expression, some smiling, some frowning, a few mid-scream. They don't like direct light. The man in the green suit had muttered as we passed through a corridor lined with 1940s war heroes. I asked what he meant, but he just kept walking. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've worked every night without issue. I clock in at 10 p.m., sit in the security booth, watch a few old monitors with grainy black and white feeds, and make rounds every hour. Easy, simple, boring, except lately, I've started noticing little things, subtle things, like how I could swear one of the figures, an old man in a top hat near the Victorian exhibit, was facing slightly more to the left than he was the night before, or how the woman in the red dress outside the ballroom scene always seems closer to the rope than she should be. Not by much, just an inch, maybe 2. Last night, I swear she was smiling. They don't move on the cameras. I've checked, but when I walk the floor, something feels off, like I'm being watched. And this morning, when I was locking up, I found a wax fingerprint on the inside of the security booth glass. I'm the only one who's supposed to be here. The night I officially started, I arrived 5 minutes early. The sky was clear, but the air hung heavy, that kind of thick quiet that presses into your ears. I stood outside the museum's iron gates, waiting, watching the shadows stretch against the walls. At exactly 9:45 p.m., the lock clicked open on its own. Inside, the same man in the green suit waited in the lobby. He didn't greet me, just nodded once and gestured for me to follow. We walked in silence. My footsteps were muffled against the thick velvet carpet. The exhibits loomed on either side, frozen scenes of Victorian banquets, courtroom dramas, twisted crime scenes. The figures were lifelike, uncomfortably so. I had to stop myself from apologizing as I brushed past a wax judge's outstretched gavel. Eventually, he led me to a narrow hallway behind the exhibits, bare walls, flickering overhead light. At the end, A small office with an old desk, a black rotary phone, and a binder. "This is yours," he said. He tapped the binder with one long, pale finger. "Read these before your shift. Follow them exactly." I opened it. The pages were yellowed and smelled faintly of ash and lemon wax. Inside was a list, typed on a typewriter. The header read, "Night Security Protocol, WAX MUCUM." He watched me read without blinking. I copied the rules down into my notebook, more out of politeness than anything else. But the wording had unsettled me. Here's what the page said. 1. Do not acknowledge any wax figure that appears to change position. They will test your attention. They want to be seen. Pretend you haven't noticed. Do not speak to them. Do not make eye contact. Point 2. Begin your hourly rounds at exactly 10 minutes past the hour. Not before, not after. Failure to do so will confuse the exhibits. 3. If you hear footsteps behind you while walking the Hall of Inventors, do not stop. Do not turn around. They do not like being seen between poses. 4. Keep room 7 locked at all times. There is no room 7 listed on the map. If you find it, do not enter. If something comes out, do not let it see your face. 5. Do not clean or touch the wax figure in the black veil. She is not part of the collection. If she appears in a different room, ignore it. Point 6. At 3:33 a.m., all monitors will briefly go dark. Do not attempt to fix them. This is normal. Use this time to stay still and quiet. 7. Leave the museum by 5:55 a.m. sharp. Do not remain inside past dawn. When I looked up from the page, the man in the green suit was gone. I don't mean he walked away. I mean he was gone, like he'd never been there. I stood in that small office, alone, surrounded by silence thick enough to choke on, wondering if I'd just been hazed. I ran my hand across the desk. No dust. Everything was meticulously clean, sterile. Even the rotary phone had no dial tone. The small black and white monitor on the desk showed 6 grainy camera angles of different exhibit rooms. All still, all silent. I considered walking out, just leaving. No job was worth this level of weirdness. But then I remembered my rent, my final eviction warning, the power bill, so I stayed. My shift started. That first hour, nothing happened. I did as instructed. At 10:10 p.m., I walked the first round, slowly, pretending not to notice when the wax pianist's fingers were curled slightly differently than they'd been earlier. I didn't look too long at the woman in the black veil, even though she hadn't been in that room when I passed it the first time. My footsteps echoed as I walked, and just once as I passed through the Hall of Inventors, I heard soft footsteps behind me, steady, measured, matching mine. I wanted to look. God, I wanted to look, but I didn't. I made it back to the security room with my heart hammering so loud. I was sure something else could hear it too. The monitors flickered briefly. Room 5's feed cut to static for a second, then came back. I stared at the screen, then at the binder beside me. The rules felt like a joke, but they were already crawling into my head like a virus. Part of me hoped it was a joke, but another part of me, a part I hadn't heard from since childhood nightmares, believed them, all of them. It was my 5th night when I slipped, not intentionally. I didn't mean to break the rule, but something about the way he was standing, it was too much. The figure I'm talking about is called the gentleman in the top hat. He's part of the museum's midnight aristocracy exhibit, a dimly lit parlor scene with velvet chairs and empty wine glasses. He's always stood by the fireplace, hand resting on the mantel, head turned slightly to the left. Always. But that night, as I walked past at exactly 10:10 p.m., his pose was wrong. He was facing the doorway now, not dramatically, just enough that I knew something had changed. His shoes, once angled toward the hearth, were perfectly parallel with the carpet. His hand no longer touched the mantel. He was looking directly at me, and for a split second, I forgot the rule. I stopped. I looked back, and I acknowledged it. Didn't you used to be? My voice died in my throat. I don't even know what I was going to say. The moment stretched thin and cold. The lights above me hummed louder than usual. The shadows around the figure deepened like ink dropped into water, and then a soft sound, like wax shifting beneath weight, like someone leaning. I took a step back. The gentleman's head was now slightly tilted again. It was just enough to send a pulse of cold through my arms, enough to make my vision go tight around the edges. I walked fast, didn't run. Running felt like the wrong kind of invitation. Back in the security booth, I kept the camera feeds up. Every few minutes, I checked Exhibit 3, zooming in on the fireplace. The gentleman hadn't moved again, but I had the unshakable sense that something had changed in me, like I'd given something permission. Later that night, around 2 a.m., I returned to the hallway near the aristocracy room. I had to. That was part of the round. I stayed close to the wall, eyes forward, as I passed the open entrance to the exhibit. I didn't look inside. I could feel him though. Not see, feel, like heat from a body in a dark room. That low, prickling awareness that something is too close. And then, from behind me, almost playful, tap, tap, tap. Not loud, not threatening, just there, like fingertips on wood. I froze. I remembered rule number 1, pretend you haven't noticed. So I kept walking, one foot in front of the other. 10 steps. 15. At the end of the hallway, I turned the corner and pressed my back to the wall. My chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. I waited a full minute before checking the camera. Feed on my handheld monitor. Exhibit 3, fireplace. The gentleman was back in his usual position. Hand on the mantel. Head turned to the left, like nothing had happened, like it was all in my head. Only there was one new detail. On the floor near his shoes, barely visible in the dim light, were 3 small fingerprints in a thin line of wax, trailing toward the hallway. By my 7th shift, I was reading the rules before I even unlocked the office door. Not because I'd forgotten them, because I was afraid I'd missed something. Every word seemed heavier now. Every sentence, a loaded warning. The rule about the footsteps, rule number 3, had started to itch at the back of my mind. I'd only ever passed through the Hall of Inventors once per shift. Quick steps, eyes forward. But that night, the route was blocked. There was an old janitor's cart in the east corridor, just sitting there, perfectly centered, like someone had wheeled it out and forgotten to bring it back. I tried moving it, but the wheels were locked, completely immovable, like it had fused to the floor. So I took the detour, through the hall. Now, the Hall of Inventors is narrow, too narrow for comfort. Wax figures flank both sides, old men in lab coats, inventors with rusted prototypes, glass eyes frozen mid. The air always feels colder there, like the AC is stronger in that stretch. Though I've never seen a vent. I stepped inside, hands in my pockets, head slightly down. I counted the figures, 18 total. I always do. I kept walking, and then, about halfway through, footsteps, light, deliberate. Exactly half a beat behind mine. I froze for a second, then remembered the rule. Do not stop. Do not turn around. I kept going. The footsteps kept pace. I passed a wax man holding a melted stopwatch. His hand looked slicker than before. SHINIER. Keep going, I told myself. I tried to walk faster, so did the footsteps. When I finally stepped out of the hall and into the adjacent gallery, I turned around only once. I was out of view. Nothing, just the wax inventors, lined up in perfect stillness, except one of them had changed. Third figure from the end, a bald man with wire spectacles. His hand had been outstretched before, palm up, as if offering something. That night, the palm was closed, a fist, clenched tight, and tucked between his fingers. was a strand of black fabric, long, thin, like it had been torn from a coat sleeve, like it belonged to someone who had walked that hall. Someone like me. I backed away, didn't finish the round, just returned to the booth, shut the door, and locked it. I sat there for the next hour, staring at the monitor that showed the hallway I'd just left. Nothing moved, but the figure with the clenched fist, still holding that black thread. At 3:33 a.m., the cameras went dark for exactly 60 seconds. No more, no less. And when they came back, on the waxman's hand was open again, empty. I don't know what compelled me to search the basement. Maybe it was the strand of black thread that had disappeared, or maybe it was the way the gentleman in the top hat had tilted his head a second time the following night, just slightly farther than before, like he was listening now, not just watching. But something told me the truth wasn't in the exhibits, it was beneath them. On my 9th shift, I used the old brass key left in the security desk drawer. I'd found it the night before, tucked under the blotter, attached to a tarnished tag that read simply, B1. There was no B1 listed on the map. Still, I searched. Past the mechanical room, beyond the staff locker hallway behind a fire door, I found it. A heavy wood-paneled door, painted the same color as the wall. You'd miss it unless you were looking. It creaked open into a stairwell that descended into stale air and darkness. No lights. I had to use my phone flashlight. Each step echoed with a soft, sticky sound beneath my boots. The kind of noise you hear when glue hasn't fully dried. The air grew colder, more humid, like something in the walls was still drying. At the bottom was a single hallway lined with supply shelves, stacks of wax molds and mannequin parts, arms, heads, half-finished eyes, and jars of glycerin. But the far end was sealed by a thick metal door, bolted shut, except one bolt had already been drawn back. I hesitated, but I opened it. The room was no bigger than a storage closet. Filing cabinets lined every wall. Dust and mold curled the edges of yellowed papers. A small table sat in the center, with a dusty audio recorder and a tape still inside it. I pressed play. The voice that came through was raspy, tired, male. Night 17. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry. I don't know what they want anymore. I followed the rules. I really did. Pause. Static crackles. Don't trust the one in green. He doesn't work here. He never did. That line stopped me cold. The man in the green suit. My employer. The one who gave me the rules. He didn't have a nameplate. No ID. No presence outside the museum. I'd never seen a computer in his office. Never heard a phone ring. I'd assumed he lived off-grid. Now I wasn't sure he was even alive. I dug deeper. The filing cabinets were packed with handwritten reports, notes by former guards, all of them dated, all signed by initials or first names only. Some went back to 1974. They each had their own list of rules variations of mine. Some overlapped. Some were new. I read one that said, if you hear someone whisper your name from inside a locked display case, do not respond. It's not your name they're saying. Another said, never allow the wax to touch your skin directly. They can taste that. But one one from 1987 made my breath catch in my throat. It was a small entry, barely legible. Saw her again tonight. The veiled woman. She always comes before someone vanishes. I think she's part of whatever keeps this place alive. Or maybe she's the only one who remembers what it really is. I flipped the page. A photo fell out. Grainy, black and white. A security cam still, from what looked like the ballroom exhibit. There were two figures standing at the far end. One was clearly wax. The other was not. The second figure was blurred, mid-step, wearing a long black veil. And even in the photo, with her face obscured, I felt it. She was looking at me. I brought the photo back upstairs. I didn't mean to, I just couldn't leave it. It sat folded in my pocket as I did my next round, and as I passed the ballroom entrance. I noticed something new. A line of wax footprints, small, bare, like someone had stepped through warm wax, and wandered forward. They stopped just before the security rope and pointed toward the hallway I had just come from. Back in the booth, I rewound the camera feed, watched the loop of footage from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. A dot m dot nothing at first, then a flicker. For one frame only, barely a whisper of visual static, she appeared, just past the ballroom door, standing still, facing the camera. Black veil, pale hands, number, feet visible. Just a soft impression where the wax seemed to breathe beneath her, and then she was gone. I checked the photo. Again, same pose, same angle, only now she was closer, not in the frame, but in the photo itself. The blur had shifted. Subtly, her head was tilted, ever so slightly, toward mine, like she'd noticed I had found it, like I'd disturbed something that didn't want to be remembered. On my 10th night, the rules changed. I don't mean someone rewrote them. The paper in the binder was still the same, but something behind those words had shifted, tightened, as if whatever enforced them was no longer content with obedience. It wanted fear, it wanted reaction. That night started like the others. I arrived just before 10 p.m., took my seat in the security booth, watched the monitors. The museum was quiet, still, the figures exactly where they should be. But at 12:04 a.m., every screen blinked, only for a second. Just a flicker. When they returned, I noticed something off. The gentleman in the top hat wasn't by the fireplace anymore. He stood near the ballroom entrance, half in shadow, no big movement, no jump scare, just an adjustment. Like a player repositioning during a long game, I flipped back to the previous camera recording, frame by frame. In the second, before the flicker, he was by the fireplace. In the second, after, near the ballroom. No. In dash between, no transition, like he'd skipped. And then, as I stared at the screen, the camera feed blinked again. Only the ballroom this time. When the image returned, he was gone. The ballroom was empty. I stood up, heart pounding, trying to reason with it. Glitch, corrupted feed, anything. But then the phone rang. The rotary phone on the desk. It had never rung before. My hand hesitated above the receiver. Don't answer it. A voice inside me said, it's not for you. But I picked it up, static. Then a whisper, not a voice, a whisper, breathy, close, almost against my ear. It said my name, twice. Then the line went dead. I slammed the phone down, locked the booth door, and scanned the cameras. Ballroom still empty. Main hall, normal. But the hallway outside the security room, there was someone standing just beyond the camera's reach. I could only see their shoulder, just the edge of a dark green suit. I backed away from the monitors. A slow knock echoed from down the hallway. Once, twice, then 3 quick taps, like it was knocking out a rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I waited. 10 minutes, 15, then I unlocked the booth and stepped out. The hallway was empty, but the gentleman was waiting in the Hall of Inventors. He stood at the center now, not posed, not stiff. His arms hung at his sides. His head was tilted farther than I'd ever seen, almost unnaturally. His mouth was open slightly, like he'd just started to say something. I took a step forward. He took one too. I froze. I hadn't seen him move, but he was closer now. 2 more steps. I was at the edge of the hall. He was 6 feet away, then 4, then I blinked. 2. I turned and ran through the eastern wing, past the mannequins and wax generals and silent crowds of frozen admirers. Their painted faces blurred in my peripheral vision, but I could feel them changing, leaning, watching. The museum had come alive. No, not alive, awake. I ducked into a side office and slammed the door, locked it. The room smelled like melted plastic and lavender oil. A janitor's closet, maybe. Inside, I sat behind the supply cart, trying to quiet my breathing. Somewhere in the hall, soft footsteps passed. Not hurried, not searching, just patient. Wax soles on marble, a dragging sound followed, like fabric being pulled. Then silence, long, smothering. I waited 10 minutes before. I cracked the door open. Nothing in the hallway, but at the end, where the camera wires fed into the wall, something new had been scrawled in wax. She knows you remember. That wasn't there before. I returned to the booth, hands trembling. 3:33 a.m. came. The monitors went black dot, all of them, but this time they didn't come back on. Not after 30 seconds, not after 60. I waited 5 whole minutes, then the booth lights flickered and died. I was plunged into complete darkness, not even the red glow of emergency. Backup lights, and then behind me the sound of wax cracking dot slowly. Wet lie, like someone stretching skin they weren't born with. I turned, expecting shadows, but there she stood. The veiled woman no more than 6 feet away, her face still hidden, veil drifting in some non-existent breeze. But her hands, they were wrong, longer than human, fingers tapering into sharp, glistening ends. Her arms hung low, almost touching the ground. She didn't move, but I felt my thoughts begin to thin, like fog rolling through my skull, and I understood something awful. She wasn't made of wax, not really. She wore it like a skin, the same way we wear clothing, a disguise, a preservation. And I had seen her, really seen her. The gentleman had brought her. He was the invitation, but she was the purpose. That night, I ran. I didn't care about protocol or payment, or finishing the shift. I sprinted for the back hallway and shoved open the fire door, slamming it shut behind me. Outside, the air was thick with fog. I didn't stop running until I reached the streetlight at the far end of the block. When I turned around, the museum was gone. No building, no awning, no plaque, just a row of bricked-up storefronts. The fog swallowed the sidewalk behind me, but I could still feel them watching, waiting. The exhibit wasn't done because I'd broken the rules. And worse, I remembered. I didn't go back the next night, or the night after. I told myself I was done, that I'd escaped, that whatever had happened inside that wax museum would collapse under the weight of disbelief and silence, like a dream too fragile to exist in daylight. But the museum didn't let go. The longer I stayed away, the worse it got at night. I'd hear tapping against my window, in perfect patterns of 3, waxy fingerprints on my bathroom mirror each morning. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, kept the lights on, all of them, always. And then on the 3rd day, I found the binder on my kitchen table. Same yellowed pages, same list of rules, only one difference, at the bottom. In handwriting I hadn't seen before. You don't clock out just by leaving. The message was signed with a single, looping letter, L. I'd never seen his name, never heard it. But the man in the green suit had always worn a pin on his lapel, a small brass letter. Now I had a name, or part of one, so I went back. Not to the museum. It wasn't there anymore. I knew it wouldn't be. I went to city records, property archives, old permits. There was no record of Leclerc's wax emporium ever existing, but I kept digging, and eventually, in a brittle box of microfilm reels, I found a clipping. 1976. Leclerc's museum reopens after fire. Beneath it, a photo, black and white, blurry, and standing at the edge of the crowd, a man in a green suit, same build, same face, same faint smile, but the article was nearly 50 years old. He hadn't aged. I thought he might have been the curator, maybe a descendant of the original owner. But then, I found another article, this one from 1983, another fire, another reopening, same museum, same man, same photo, not similar, identical. Copy and paste, no difference. That wasn't possible, unless he wasn't real. I dug further, and then, in an old police report dated 1991, I found a witness statement. One sentence stood out. The wax figures didn't move until he showed up. The man in green. That's when the screams started. That's when it clicked. He wasn't there to protect anyone. He was there to deliver them, like a conductor keeping the symphony in order. A handler. The rules weren't safeguards. They were instructions for the exhibits. Not me. They kept me tame, predictable, easy to track, easy to manipulate. He never warned me. He trained me like preparing livestock before the slaughter. That night, I found a note under my pillow, small, folded in half. No handwriting, just printed block text. The wax does not forget. Beneath it, another list. Shorter this time, only 2 rules. You may no longer look. Away you may no longer leave. No signature. But I didn't need one. I saw it clearly in my head. The smile behind the green suit. The polished shoes. The black eyes that never blinked. He had given me the illusion of order, of safety, but all along, I was the exhibit. He just hadn't finished posing me yet. I tried to run, not just from the city, from everything. I packed a bag, left my phone behind, and drove west. No destination, just distance. As much asphalt between me and that place as possible. But it followed. Not the building, the presence. The first sign came at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I walked into the restroom and found a small wax handprint on the mirror. Perfectly formed, child-sized. The second came later that night, in a roadside motel. I turned on the TV, static. Then for a moment, one frame flickered through, the ballroom. Empty, but the camera angle was from the ceiling. I'd never seen that view. Before I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened the binder again. Yes, it was still with me. No matter how many times I threw it away, it reappeared. On my dashboard, in my bag, folded inside my coat pocket. The rules no longer held power. They weren't commandments. They were mockery. But that night, I noticed something new. A final page, written in the same blocky, old-fashioned font. Emergency protocol, wax exposure imminent. I hadn't seen this before. I read it slowly. There was only one instruction: to halt progression. Offer yourself willingly. Do not let them take your face by force. Beneath it, someone had scrawled in pen, better to choose than to be chosen. I stared at that line for hours, somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m. I finally understood what the museum wanted. Not screams, not chaos. Compliance. It didn't hunt victims, it recruited them, and the man in green, he wasn't a killer, he was a curator. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I turned the car around, drove back, 4 hours. The roads made no sense. I'd follow signs that looped in circles. Buildings blinked out when I looked away. My GPS spun endlessly. But eventually the fog found me, and with it the museum. No address, no building number, just the red awning and brass plaque, open only to memory. Inside, the lights were already on. No footsteps echoed, no voices, just the soft hum of wax breathing behind the walls. The exhibits were where I left them, only now there were new additions. One of the security monitors showed a figure in a booth, hands on the desk, head down. It took me a second to realize it was me. Frozen, waxen, dressed in the same uniform. That's when I understood the real layout. The museum didn't just preserve scenes from history, it collected lives every shift. I worked every round, I walked, every whisper I ignored. It was shaping me, smoothing the edges, hollowing me out, until there was only one step left, consent. I stood in the center of the main hall. The air grew colder, thicker. The walls pulsed faintly, like lungs. And then she came, the veiled woman. No footsteps, just presence. She stood at the far end of the room, slowly raised her head. Her veil fell. I will not describe what was beneath. Not because I can't, but because you shouldn't know. That's how it starts, with knowing. She reached toward me, long wax-dripping fingers, stretching forward. I stepped closer and whispered the only thing I could. I remember. The lights blinked out. I don't remember how I got back. One moment, I was standing beneath the chandelier in the main hall, whispering into the dark. The next, I was seated in the security booth, warm coffee in hand, uniform neatly pressed, like nothing had happened. Except the walls were wrong. The hallway cameras showed galleries I'd never seen before. A dentist's office from the 1960s. A crumbling subway tunnel. A suburban bedroom with toys, frozen mid-play. All perfectly still. All curated. When I stepped out of the booth, the wax figures were different too. One of them, a tall man in a familiar coat, had my face, but the eyes were blank, empty. He was positioned at a desk, hands resting calmly on fake mahogany. A security tag pinned to his shirt. T. Carter. That's my name. That's my posture. But I was looking at him from across the room. I could move. I could breathe. I could think. I wasn't him, was I? Behind me, the veiled woman passed by silently. She didn't look at me, just kept walking. Her feet didn't touch the floor. In the gift shop, I found a new souvenir. A snow globe. Inside was a perfect miniature replica of the wax museum. And within that, smaller still, a tiny figure behind the front desk. I shook it. The snow swirled. The lights flickered. When I set it back down, I could have sworn the figure had turned its head just slightly. That night, I tried to leave again, but there are no doors, only halls that lead to more exhibits. The museum expands with each shift. Each memory I reclaim. I no longer check the time. There are no clocks here, but I know when new guests arrive. I hear the brass bell at the entrance chime, always twice, never more. I hear the footsteps echo down the marble foyer, and I hear the man in green welcome them, calm and smooth. He offers them the job, just like he did to me, just like I'll do, eventually. Because here's the secret. I learned too late. The wax doesn't just preserve, it copies, and over time, it decides which version deserves to remain. The one that serves, the one that obeys, the one that obeys, the one that forgets. So if you're ever offered a night job in a building that seems too quiet, if the rules sound too specific, too strange, read them out loud. And whatever you do, don't remember my name. He's still using it.